Put it up. All right. Here we are. Back to YouTube Live. It's not like I don't want to be here because there's always something popping on this channel. And I want to take a moment here just for a second, to let it stream, let it breathe. It's going to be a minute for everyone to join the call for YouTube or Facebook to get the sanctions to put me on and all of this. So it's going to take a minute. And then when you do see this on, if you hear it, just type in the chat, I can hear it. And that will let me, do my thing. If it's low, let me know because I can crank it up. Let's just, all right. So I'm waiting on you. I see some people already joining the chat. And I'm just asking if you hear me, go ahead and hit that I hear you button. Also, I know from what I'm looking at on the preview, it seems like there's a little elongation on the head or something like that. But so I'm not sure if you're seeing that, but just so you know, there is going to be an HD copy of this available a little bit later on. It'll be on YouTube and I'll share it back to Facebook. So don't worry about it. Also, if it breaks up at a certain point, maybe your connection start going out, you feel like, oh, they all against me. You'll get the archive later on. Don't freak out. Don't blow your day. It'll actually happen for you. And what's going to happen is major stuff. Like I'm actually here right now to talk to you about something that I've done my due diligence on investigating and realized that for me to keep this away from those who listen to this message at all any longer, it's an extreme injustice because they might as well go ahead and get started in their sovereignty, fortifying that more, and also getting solutions to actually getting the resources, the current, et cetera, needed to birth that fat ass projection you got of what you need in this reality to really, really get to your fulfillment and sovereignty. So this is where those resources will come from. Now, first and foremost, I do want to say, I spent quite a bit of time also drilling deep into, okay, how do we solve this whole money problem, though, with the conscious community? You ask people for something, they feel like they're in church again, like they got I don't know, is it a scam? And what is this all about? And then, of course, it's like making a living while you're also working to expand your consciousness is also a bit tough, especially if your job or whatever is directly contrary to what it is that you've come to realize and come to understand. So, because of that, what we've done personally is not only have we started Spirit Text, which is open source wealth, but we've also begun to get into manufacturing. Like we're about to introduce some amazing products. Aqua is one of those products that lets you program water. So we went in it from that perspective. Like what I learned from my mother was she was like, James, is because we're not making anything. Once we become the manufacturers, then we will have part of our power back. So you got to remember that we have creative people out here that have massive ideas for creating things that'll help humanity with all this knowledge that we've gleaned from our existence in this world. However, those people actually getting to the point of concept to creation is pretty difficult, right? So the world is basically rigged. So again, we know how to get through a lot of that. That's what we talk about. We talk about how to get the energy balance, how to get to that next level. And what that has a lot to do with is us connecting with ourselves, getting our filters clean, getting our consciousness expansion going on. Let me move this real quick. I don't want to hear any vibrations over here today. It's YouTube or Facebook. They're the same ones, actually. They're the same people. So anyway, what I'm getting at here is that when I put these massive projections together to build things like the Resistance, Secret Energy, Astro Quest, the Keymaker, all the stuff that we've done thus far, it's still got to actually get done. So the inner workings to those kind of things is what I spend a great deal of time doing. And I monitor the complexity. And I'm like, man, if anybody else has got to be doing this, I can imagine even people who don't like using computers, like what would it be like? I used to like using computers. And now because of the conflicts, the problems, the connections and the technology and all that, it's like, man, I don't even like that anymore. I want to go to something else because they've overcomplicated it. They're causing confusion with the system. And because of this, it's been holding people up from their true potential. They've even gone into believing that these skin suits and these bodies is actually who they are, and they forgot about their power. And then because people can forget, when people forget about their power, they become disempowered. So they think low of themselves. They think their value, oh, well, there's nothing special about me, because they're not aware of their power. So this means that they can be sold for cheap, meaning this means that they can stoop low for what they believe is their true allotment. And then if they're not in the realization of the greener pastures, they're basically what they say is you can never miss what you never had. So if they're never aware of what they actually had, then this buffoonery, which we're looking at going on in the matrix all the time, can continue. However, we are that vibration, that resonance that is disruptive to that. And so the reason why I'm actually having this conversation with you today is actually about one of the most disruptive forces on the dimension right now. Disruptive meaning that even the juggernaut, the big, the Merrill Lynch's and the big, let's say the Facebooks and all these different juggernauts have to even move out the way for something when it's not asking. Cryptocurrency, which is what this conversation is about. It's not asking whether people understand it or not. It's not asking if they could stop it or not. It's just coming through. And this is another thing. If you're listening to this conversation today and it gets a little bit tough for you to fathom what's happening, remember this, right? Or what I'm explaining, you'll get it. Don't think you're going to get it all in one day. I'm going to do my best to explain it to you so you can actually receive what it is here. That's why I'm going to do some of the metaphysical aspects of it. But remember this. See, what happens is that you drive a car every day. But does that mean that you know how to break that car down, drop the engine, open that thing up if it get wet, pull the spark plugs? Do you know how to do all that? No, but you drive the car, right? So this is what happens when you start talking to people about things like cryptocurrency, because they only see it as an investment. Right away, what they start doing is they go into their investor mode, the one they downloaded from the last program or TV show they watched. And then, okay, so I'm the investor now. So now if I'm going to invest, I need to know everything about it. So this would be like saying that now you need to know every single thing about this car. Now it's possible, but you have to realize, like, you don't know everything about how your money is working in the bank. You just think that when you go in, you do your work, you get your outcome, or your income. And then you get your income, you go and take it to the bank, they cash you out. And then when you want to buy something, you either swipe the card or use PayPal. And as long as the money is there, your transaction is done. However, behind the scene, there's all sorts of stuff going on. In fact, most of what's going on takes days and days and days to even completely go through the system and say, oh, yeah, he bought a Snickers bar at the store the other day, because that's how slow the system is moving. So basically, middlemen, if you call it that, are floating all of that. Like they call it, like the Catch Me If You Can movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, how you can float a check for 3 days and a little bit more. So there can literally be a deposit, and as long as that account and those numbers are registering properly, that money is debited. And even if it's done by a Nigerian on a check scam, it still doesn't stop it from actually registering within the system and then clearing for a few days, okay? So this means that the system itself is highly prone to fraud. And this is what I really want to get through to you today. The reason we have so much loss in this world right now and mismanagement is because we literally have a vacuum. And on the currency, like this is our money, it's our current. Our current and how it comes through has so many holes in it. So many, hey, let's add another zero. Hey, let's rig the entire thing since we own it. It has so many of those holes that by the time it gets to you, that little old money, it seems to be worth so much, but there's other players in the game that have so much more, right? Like $40,000 a day on a penthouse over in Four Seasons for the week. You see what I mean? With the boat, that kind of expenditure. Why someone is also like, hey, man, can you let me use $10 so I can eat today? You see what I mean? So we have this huge gap, and that gap is because there's a lot of loss. So today we are talking about how to basically close that gap, how to actually build the bridge. And because the new level of consciousness, because you got to even watch what you say. If I say a new world, people, new world, oh shit, it's Illuminati. So I got to come up with a new house. Oh, I don't want to be assigned anything. I live in nature. New nature did. Oh, well, nature is a program. Nature still too. It has a death cycle. Okay, new. So now when you're talking to people, it's like all antithesis. So I'm just going to tell you just directly, there is a new plane, if you may, already built. Current is there, and it has so much. It has more than people can actually even receive. And this is what we're going to be talking about, is tapping into that plane, because we did it spiritually. I don't want you to think it was because of the cryptocurrency and the AI robots and all that shit that this ended up becoming so. No, it was because many were under the impression around 2012, or actually around the time the tuning forks, them towers dropped. They were in an impression that we were going into something massive because we were more awake. Something happened. We call that the activation. Some went through it like a ripple effect. It went through across the dimension. I got hit with it. I'm kind of an early bloomer. I fell off the tree. So it was like that was the expanse and the process that we went to. And now what we're doing is we're bringing all of that information. And that's why this is called metaphysics, all that experience, all that wisdom. And we're bringing it into right now, here, right now in our world, right now, today. And we are actually saying, OK, well, how can I go from where I'm at right now all the way to the top? So this is what this is going to be about right now. How, if you're paying attention, just like, see, something like this happened before the internet. And many of us, like I'm 38 now, like we've been online. So we know that this whole online thing started not too long ago, meaning that I was actually alive when Prodigy came online, America Online, and all that started happening. And so just like any other person, I could have went and bought yellow.com, red.com. I could have bought that. There was nothing stopping me, but except for my knowledge and my wisdom. And that's why I say by lack of knowledge, they shall perish. So because you didn't realize while you were looking at He-Man or while you was doing whatever you were doing, that, hey, you could go right there right now and secure your entire pipeline to your future so that whatever you decide to do, you at least have the resources to power you through it, but you didn't have it, right? Or some of us, even the older ones, they was even there. They was even watching some of their friends get involved in all sorts of stuff, and it just went right by. And then now that's like the twinge in the heart. Every time they lay down at night, they're like, man, I should have went with John and them and went ahead and bought neighbors.com. And then, you see what I mean? So it's like it becomes a lot of regret. So we realize that if we just take the cream of the knowledge, the cream of the experience in the dimension, we synthesize, and we've talked about this for a long time, just synthesizing what is the truth. And that quirk that we end up with, that nucleus that we end up with, then we can use that. We can tap into that. That's infinite power. OK, so for me to get into this, I first need to explain to you just the whole concept itself of money. So that way you get it. So you understand what it's really about. So a lot of this will make sense for you. So let's just understand that like they say, in God we trust, or follow the money, that for this segment of humanity, all of who basically everything that they've embodied, let me get my terminology right here. The gods have always been money. Okay, this is the news flash for a lot of people. Like God is where people have been drawing their energy from, their inspiration from, right? So when people start getting hooked on to, well, that means more cattle, or that means more gold, or that means more computers, or that means more knowledge, that's actually what created the gods for different segments. So that's why even on the dollar bill today, it says, in God we trust. That's why when Caesar deified himself, he put himself on a coin, which means Khan, and that he actually became a god by putting his face on that gold coin. So let's look at the beginning. So we have more knowledge about this. This is not just off the dome. Hey, I'm just going to play with this story today. No, this is years and years of experience and crossing into other expanses and making sure and confirming that that entire blueprint is correct. So when you look at the English language and you see this letter right here, which would be an upside down A, that this A is actually the horns of a cow, and it is known as the auroch, okay? And what auroch means is that basically the reason why it's the letter A is that that is how wealth is accumulated during the time that this whole thing started with language. And if you look in those cultures, the Sumerian culture, if you look in the Tibetan culture, the use, and even in the Hindu culture, the use, or the ancient Oriental culture, the use of the cow was most instrumental, because not only could this thing plow for you, you could also eat from it the milk, and you could do so much with this cow. Like, so the more you had, so then it was buffalo, right? Like, we're talking about aurochs. You got to go look this up. This is like the cow's great granddad, grandma. And so that one is built totally different. It's like in the amount of consciousness it has. So people were connected to this, and they actually even believed it was their mother. So even words like the moo and the moon, and then all the moon gods, and then the crescents, and all this became eventually associated with all the energy that people were seeing. They were seeing their crops come in. If it wasn't for these aurochs, then there would be no crop. And then, see, an auroch, though, is like stable. It's not like, you can't really take an auroch 100 miles. Like it's built to be there, that kind of body style, that kind of vessel, right? So the next level of it was the bovid. Okay, this is your letters A and B. That's why it's easy as 1, 2, 3. You know, there's real knowledge going on behind a lot of this stuff if you know this occult knowledge. So the bovid meant mobile wealth, because bovids happen to be able to be transported. They can pull for long periods of time. So what you had is wealth. How many cows you had determined how many wives you had, determined your allotments, determined everything. The rich man had a lot of cows, even all the way to Texas. This is like, see, none of these systems of current ever die, right? They just remain as layers or planes or foundation under other ones. So even in Texas, those old cowhand Hicks, they still know the power of that cattle, and they've made money off of that forever, right? And getting people hooked to it, those golden arches. So those were the aurochs. So that's where it began. And rather rapidly, we began to progress through what we wanted as money. Now, gold always was like this hidden power, okay? Because gold is for more than wearing necklaces, okay? Let me just fix this for, I got my brother Life in the studio today. He may say what's up when we close it down. So obviously that the gold thing, like, it's still in our soul, like that gold, like, but you could do more with gold than just put it around your neck. The mystery with gold is what's formed when planets are going through like the Series A, Series B, Series C, and they get to a point where the yin and the yang start to get completely into a tight knit with each other, and then there's an explosion. And what generally comes from that explosion first, or implosion, is gold. And then that gold permeates throughout the reality. And because it's such a great conductor, you can actually tap into stuff with gold. Now, there's different kinds of gold. There's Ufaz gold. There's golds from different veins. So gold is like an antenna. And our ancestors always used it in that capacity. It wasn't just to be on the neck and all that kind of stuff, even though, you know, a cat with gold in his mouth and gold all on his neck is touching it. But it doesn't mean that you could tap into it. Just like people touch money every single day, it doesn't mean that they know exactly what to do with it. So there's even an alchemical process that gold can be taken through, and it can be eaten, and to cause high levels of conductivity within the body, fulfilling one of the missing periodic tables of the body. But that's another story. Gold-faced gods, those who worship the sun inside of themselves. So they were black from the outside because the sun burned from within inside of them. Okay, so that whole empire was the sun still going on, right? So then you finally got into these bronze and iron ages. Okay, so this is obviously time for war, because gold, you don't make no, bludgeoned sword out of 22, 24, 23 karat gold. It's just going to bend, right? So bronze and iron are metals that are not only easy to find, they're very abundant, but they're also very hard. So when it comes to building things with these metals, and so we went through an entire metal age. Let me just grab some water real quick. Went through an entire metal age. And basically whoever had the best craftsmanship could win. This was the time of the smith, when the blacksmiths basically ruled, like the feudal lords, because they knew the secrets. And this is why there was always secrets with metallurgy. And that's where ultimately alchemy birthed out of that, right? Hermetics birthed out of that. And, so the working of the metal, this was like a secret. It's like, well, how do you get this metal to fuse with the other metal? Do not tell them. This is like the Celts and the Nords and the ones who practice the most. Those are the smiths. Okay. So then we moved on, so each person, though, mind you, every time each person is thinking, this is it. This is going to be the end. Once I get a lot of this, then I'm going to, be forever. Like, obviously, on a physical reality, forever is limited. And generally, you can't take it with you. Like, your experiences and what you're gaining on those levels are what's going to be riding with you. All this dense matter is going to remain here. It can't fit through the womb. So what happens is that this next age that comes across is our industrial age, okay? And this is like the birth of machines, okay? And this is the age actually you find most people missing, meaning that the state of consciousness when machines start moving in is already obliterated. And this is because the world has just come off of a war. This is why there was lots of slavery going on. It's not just with black people. It's not just with Polish people. That during in the wake of the industrial age, it literally enslaved the world to build the machine. So that's why, when I'm thinking, when they say rage against the machine, this is what they're talking about. But see, machines are not computers in a sense. Like, that's different terminology. Electronics, wires, those kind of things. Machines, like the old cars, they can run without, they can run right through water, come right out and keep going because it's all mechanical. You see what I mean? So when the machines came, basically man prostrated. Like, remember, each of these are gods. So man prostrated to the machine, and the machine used man to create a world filled with machines. And obviously the vibration and the harmonics of the machine is what has done the most damage to the world. Because even the wars, in a game where you blink for a little bit and then you hit start here again and you come back, and something like that, death doesn't actually have that much weight. What has the most weight is what's going on with the collective, why it's actually in these existences. So when you have these tones and vibrations, like what the machines do, jackhammers, saws, all this kind of stuff, obviously nature is taken its toll and degraded that field a bit more, right? So the age of the machine is being birthed. Man then is able to fly, and cars and all this kind of stuff that's basically plagiarizations from spirituality, but new to this man who's gone through these elements that are shaping and molding him. Because remember, none of this stuff from gold, even the plastic, is not real. Like it is real. Because how some people say, well, plastic is fake. Anything you pull from this earth is real. So plastic didn't come from space somewhere on a whole nother. It's from here. It's what we did with petroleum. So it has some level of sentience to it, which brings us to the next point. So obviously man's now built these machines, and he is now using these machines as an extension of himself. And that's why the buildings and all that stuff, all this stuff starts again. Okay. History does really repeat itself, but let's just see how everyone that's just stuck in it and not able to get outside the box truly to see it as a machination, they feel like each time one of these roll around, because they're still different ages, you could have been here before but not recognize it because the GUI or the skin that's covering it all looks a bit different. The age is different. Now we're building things out of plastics. Now we have machines to cut things down and all these different stuff. So it takes on a different appearance. It takes on a different geometry, but it's the same thing. And this, when you realize this, then you can become a master. Every time the age comes in, you can completely master the system to get basically out of the entire thing. Like, realistically, if anyone wants to keep playing Zodiac all day, then let them sit here and do it. But there's something much more expanded, and you could tell that just by the things that are here, clear proofs. Not like you don't got to believe in anything. Go look at a plant and start taking it apart and just think for yourself one moment. Now they talk about this iPhone 10 is supposed to be the biggest thing coming, but man, how do you fit a pistol in with? How do you keep pollen on top of a pistol and bring it completely through the process of metamorphosis with wind blow? I mean, come on, it's like it's not even in the league. So the greatest thing that's ever built here, we're actually still standing in, one of them at least. So let's keep going through this. So now this plastic age comes, okay? The damn plastic age is still here. Like, if the whole ocean may be filled with plastic soon. It's like every time I get a package for something, there's so many pieces of plastic that I can't do anything with. And it's like, okay, what's happening here when the customer is so much more interested in the packing than they are what's actually inside the box? It must be wrapped in plastic, then some more cardboard. So basically we get this age of even the currency. Because remember, all through these ages, the metal or the time or whatever, it became the current. So in this plastic age, that's when they start passing out them credit cards. It was like, yo, we got these credit cards, and you could literally have, I remember when American Express Black came out, you would have thought Jesus came back or something, the way everyone knew about it. It was like, yo, this card right here, you could spend $100,000. You got cats coming to the club and they like literally wearing it on their shirt. Like, yeah, look, I could go get 100, right? I could go get a Bentley, knowing damn well that still they're going to call, hey, this is abnormal spending. We gave you the black, but that was just because you filled out for. So anyway, you get the plastic age going, right? And that moved us completely into the computer age. And thus the computers, oh my goodness, like I talked about the language of light, of how basically there's a higher code, if you may, that if you actually utilize that system, you can manipulate anything on the reality, because it would be only obeying its natural essence. Like it would just think that that was the thing to do because it would feel that way. That's why sometimes you can't even trust your feelings if you're lost. So it's like, oh, I feel like I'm connected to this. And so let me explain to you. Carbon and silicon. Silicon on the periodic table, carbon, these two elements, when you put them together, they attempt to actually, well, silicon mainly attempts to try to communicate with the carbon-based molecule. Remember, we're carbon-based molecules. Computers are silicon. But see, the silicon, it's sentient too. And it's silica, your quartz crystal. The people are like, wait a minute, what do you think? We're close to machines? Okay, I'm done. He's already got those weird tattoos. I'm done. No, silica is your quartz crystals, all them crystals you just, oh, namaste. That feeling and connection is actually coming from different variations of organic silica and also other chemicals and compounds mixed together, creating colors, things formed over a prolonged period of time. Or just like they started creating diamonds. Diamonds take thousands of years to be formed, but now they can make one in Canada in 10 minutes. Take it through the same process. Then you just get people arguing about which one is really real. But the real facts that's being brought up is that you can actually take these elements and you can create them in a synthesized process and produce them much more rapidly, okay? So what this means is that we took the silica and we started creating, well, it looks like it was being done from the Temple of Edfu times, but that the true use of the black goo was to create the first huge motherboards or processors to record and maintain basically a crystal grid of memories of all the interactions that have gone on here on this planet, but not just from humans, everything that came into the grid. And this is what all these ancient sites and pyramids and all that were really connected to do, and are still doing that on their octave, right? So what's happening here is that whole grid of connection with using silica, silicates, crystals, the knowledge of the power when crystal was the god, okay? That is a level of knowledge that brought about, again, the knowledge of understanding how to build computer chips, because that's ultimately what it's made out of. And then ultimately, this all boils down to sand on an ocean. Meaning like sand is what we're talking about. You superheat sand, it becomes glass. You keep superheating it, you keep removing impurities, it becomes pure quartz. It is highly conductive, and if you start shaping it and fashioning it like a Jew can do a trillion cut, then it has more facets, so it has actually more of a dish to communicate. But I don't know about that, though, because that was the crystal age. So anyway, moving through this, we find that finally, some people are saying, so what's going to be after the computer age is going to be the age of ether. You heard it here now. Like there's going to be a final discovery, and when it finally happens after the, they say the tipping point, when people start realizing, yeah, there's a whole nother field that you have around your body, and that one also has even access to other spaces. It's kind of even what you're using when you're seeing dreams, and it can even do more, and we can even charge it, we can even nourish it, we can even take care of it. So that awareness, because they're simple machines like gastric discharge device, can show you the energy field vividly with your own eyes around your body. So let's say, for instance, everyone sees the gastric discharge device pictures and says, wow, there's another field around my body. Then the age of ether starts to come in because people start realizing there's an ethereal component to their body. But of course, many of us have known that for a long time. So we're talking about when the masses come to the awareness of that, that ends the world of computers as we know it. And then when AI finally rears its face and then singularity happens, the etheric consciousness will always remain there. It will keep expanding. So this is also about how you're positioning yourself now. You got to get on this path now, so that way you're not sitting always getting hit with these ages, errors, they call them. Don't get, you're just getting slammed with these waves. And it's like, if you ever been out there where the waves are really hitting, it's like before you even recover, you're like, what happened? Woo! Oh my goodness, I'm going to die. I'm going to whoosh. And it's pretty intense. And this is likened unto what most people are experiencing when they don't know the signs of the times. So finally, we get to a point where now you need to understand the banking part of this, right? You're getting the metaphysical aspects, but now let's talk about the banking. So what we have is we have really policies going on in the world. It's important for me to give you an eye into the old world. There actually wasn't a thing called interest. Now, there were other systems. I'm not going to tell you this was the greatest place, and they were all sweet and kind, and we all lived on the island. We fed each other grapes. That ain't the story of humanity in this last 10,000 years. What was going on is you had a lot of centralized power systems, and inside that system, there were few vacuums, meaning few different people doing their own different kind of thing. It's a lot less people. The earth has time to grow and experience and realize its individuality before the crazy stuff starts. So during this time, you had simple principles that pretty much resided over kingdoms. So you did have a king and, gods and a few other things set up. But these simple principles were things like, because it was all centralized, there's no interest. There's no such thing as interest. Because what interest means on money. Okay, like having to borrow something and pay more back than you borrowed. See, the reason why those kind of things were stomped out really early is because it actually creates what we know as debt. So the original systems, which are function very similar to barter, is that everything was, you had to find what the equal was of to it. The equal was of it. And the reason why I mentioned that is, remember, like in the ancient Arab tradition, the ancient Islam, there's no such thing as interest. And in fact, if you charge your brother interest, it's basically like you were acting like the devil. Like if you asked for more back than you were actually given, it was known to throw you off balance. Because think about it, that's really the real principle we want to work with here. If you work for something, you get it, you should be able to have it. So that way everyone is not looking at you like, why ain't you have anything yet? You've been doing all this work, or you haven't done anything. How do you have that much? And this is what goes on in the world, right? So they wanted to keep everything balanced from that perspective. I'm not saying everything else was balanced, but for that perspective, it was really balanced with, hey, no interest. Because also, if you charge someone interest, it was also like it was taken as you were trying to muscle in on the king. Because the king was the one charging the most interest, thus levying taxes. So if you had your own like side taxes, just like right now, it's like you start up your own tax organization, they're going to be like, what are you doing? So just think about it. You got to put yourself as a fly on the wall and reverse engineer the entire thing, and you'll come to this point of realizing there was no interest. So what happened was, we get a time of what we know as the feudal lords, okay? And this is the part of school that you were actually asleep on. Most of us, at least me, I probably won't even spell it right. So feudal lords, okay? This is a time when basically now the kingdoms are split into little fiefdoms, as they call it, from what I can remember. And these little fiefdoms are ruled by these individual, generally smiths, and they're levying taxes, but they basically have a price to pay to the king. The king's like, look, y'all in charge of the whole thing now. I'm not going to be managing all this like Moses, no longer managing all the people, but hiring the judges to do it. See, the instructions are already there. So what happens is that he takes the feudal lords and he says, y'all go and micromanage the thing, and then y'all owe me this amount. Well, whatever you get over that is on you, but you owe me this amount. So these little feudal lords actually became so powerful that they actually end up even becoming to the point where they can influence entire countries. Now, some of the feudal lords that you'll recognize the most under their name is actually the Knights Templar. Okay? Because in that area that they were in, if you ever want to see if white people have been enslaved before, because they definitely have, in these kingdoms, these feudal lords would tax and levy on the people so heavy, it was like, baby, you would even get can I get a pence? Can I just get a little crumb? And it was just like, no, it's like, my daughter's dying. This kind of thing was really happening over there, and they were ruling by the sword. Since this is the Iron Age, it's like heavy armor and, big Conan looking cats, right? So this is what's happening. It's not a myth. So what happens is that the Knights Templar, or basically then known as feudal lords, became so wealthy, they started being able to influence kings, and kings were even borrowing money and resources from them, because the king, it was always by birthright, and some of these people were not able to rule at all. They were couldn't even tie their own shoes, all spoiled, all sorts of stuff. And, so these feudal lords, they were like real in the field, so they had way more intelligence and knowledge. So it wasn't but a short period of time before the king started trying to borrow from them, even for protection and all sorts of stuff. So this is when you start seeing the big shift of things being in the hands of emperors and all this, other humans. Okay. Now there's people, pimps, that don't mind enslaving other humans. So for you to think that it's so far off that there's another being that may not be actually have a physical body as you know it, that may be interested in that same thing, it's not far off. And most people have called that being the devil or Satan. Okay, so that's the only term you have, even if those words specifically, mainly Satan, don't even mean exactly what we've come to believe it as. The devil, more closer to, because of its division, its divide, its evil, it's turning it opposite, its awareness in the reality, its Baphometic type of reality, all of that, what we would call life, which is a lie in many cases, is constructed. So they speak with a forked tongue. They tell you things that it is the truth, but it's kind of like not as you understood it to be, like that. Weird stuff. Okay. So anyway, staying focused, you have Knights Templar, right? So they got all the money and they're sitting back. They've basically vacuumed the entire land. Everyone that is transacting and doing anything are all paying them. So they said, you know what? We need to get to another territory. We need to get over there where today is Iraq, Iran, what we would call Arabia, what we would call Persia, all those areas. We need to get over there because I heard, and then the stories just are endless. You know, from the 1001 Arabian Nights all the way to, you know, everything you can think of in the imagination of the people on the other side of the world of what they could get from the other side of the world. But the thing was, it wasn't like you were just going into somebody's shit that you were going to take. Meaning that between Bin Saba, Hashashin, genies, sharifs, Aladdins, and all the rest of that people think is false, but still even exists today, jinn, all of that, there was a stronghold that could not even be breached by what we know as the European Caucasus, those areas. It wasn't impossible for them to even get into the structure. They would lose horribly. And this actually is, you know, you're catching somewhat of the end of it when they start reporting the Crusades and the massive losses that the Catholics and all of them would incur with trying to deal with these Arabs who basically they were on their territory. They're used to dealing with sand, desert, all these different things that will consume their armies. So the Jesuits, because this is who's on the other side, that's a whole nother conversation about what they were doing before the Knights Templar popped up. Interesting story though. But the Jesuits are like, man, we're losing these wars. And if we can't get the Holy Land, then we can't authenticate the Christ myth. We need the Holy Land. And then also people believe in the Christ myth and they're trying to get to the Holy Land. They're getting robbed and they're getting beaten and they're piling Christians up by the roadside as a warning for all Christians not to try to enter into this Holy Land. How can we keep the Christ myth going with this? So one of the leaders of the Knights Templar, somehow this gets in. You know, it's still a small world. Get some water here. It's still a small world, so it's not like they got to jump on the cell phone and figure out the Jesuits are having a problem dealing with the Arabs. So this is what happened. The Knights Templar struck a deal. They told the Jesuits, look, we can give you the security. We can secure your people going into the Holy Land. We can help you take the Holy Land. Jesuits like, I'm listening. Basically, what do you need? This is what we need. First of all, we want to be able to lend people money. And right then the Jesuits, no. Because see, a lot of these people are coming from old states of consciousness that everyone practices as a principle. It doesn't mean that they're good or bad. They have this way. It's like trying to tell someone about computers that didn't even grow up in that age. They're like, I don't the beeping and the phone and all the button. I don't want to deal with that. And then also, you know, it just keeps going. Like people are out of their league, right? So the Jesuits, when they were asked to that first request, they refused it. No. Then they got their ass kicked a little bit more, and then they came back and they said, okay, what is it that you really want to do with this interest? And then the Knights Templar were already ready for them because they're actually moving with another hyperdimensional being that we'll get with later, but they were already ready for the Jesuit slip right then of allowing them to charge interest. So they presented this. We will allow, if you allow us to charge interest, we will do a few things. One, we will create forts from here to the Holy Land, from the major places that people are coming from, will create forts along the path. And those forts will serve for two things. One, it'll serve to keep everything protected in good distance from each other. Two, they will serve as fortresses to house people that are going to the Holy Land. And most importantly, it will become a bank. Now, the whole concept of banking was born right then, this level of banking. What this level of banking is about is that, remember, there's no credit cards, there's nothing. So if you're leaving, let's say, I don't know, we just come up with a place in your mind, and you're going to the Holy Land, Damascus, whatever, everything that you need to make that entire trip, you need to bring with you. So, of course, you're gonna come through with a caravan. Actually, the more money you have, the more they were like, yo, he coming. You know, he's still coming. It's like, wow, look at all those, because he's bringing food, he's bringing everything, you know. And then also, when you're going to the Holy Land, there was, you know, the zakats and all these different things you needed to pay, the charity, the priest, the, I'm kiss my daughter, name her, all that was going to cost. So they needed to bring all of that with them. And this is what left them as just like, again, for the mercenaries in the desert, this was like fatted calf. They were like, here they come, and it was over. So the Knights Templar were going to solve that problem for the Jesuits. So you can see how they were like, yo, let's let them do what they do, because then this other system could start where from that first fortress, don't worry, this is Disney. Disney animation right here. from that fortress, that first fortress that you hit, you know, which wasn't too far from probably where you were staying at, you can put all your goods and your money and everything, right there. And then they would assess what the value of it is. And then they would give you a little piece of paper. And with that, and a little signet and everything on it, with that, when you got to the next fort, you could take that paper to them, and they would give you and advance you. So this means you weren't rolling with everything. This meant that you had protection as you go. So that's how the first bank started. Now, this seems kind of like just a process that's almost natural to people who don't realize what's going on in the background. And what actually was going on in the background is actually at some point, those feudal lords under Smith, which is Cain, had come in contact with some knowledge, some deeper esoteric knowledge that actually is related to why John the Baptist's head got cut off, which is all as a metaphor of a talking head. And that John actually comes back in the Greek as Oannes, which actually comes back further and further till you get to basically a fish god who supposedly came out from the ocean and taught men during the day. This is basically the Saturnalian mythos. And so through this process, this god, which was not around during the times of the Knight Templar, somehow they say the Knights Templar fell into possession of the head of the god, that somehow the head of this god was still circulating long after it had left its physical body. And this head was known to prophesy. It became an oracle, but really more on a malevolent level, that if you want to know how to destroy your opponent and you really to do some sacrifices, then the head would basically grant these abilities. So this is okay. It's skipping. Yeah. All right, let me just back out and re-enter then. All right, so somebody's saying it's skipping, so we're gonna back out and re-enter because obviously that's, you know, it's free.